Yo, what up, guys? It's Flark, and let's talk covenants. So obviously this has been my most requested video for quite some time now, and I can kind of see why. These things are extremely powerful, impactful, and they're very diverse. So you're comparing a set of utility skills against another set of utility skills, and it's very difficult to get like a one-to-one comparison between those two things. They're very unique. And in PvP, when that utility matters a lot, it becomes even more impactful that you choose the right one. And that's tough. Believe me, I know. They have 4 different covenants with 3 different paths and a whole bunch of different choices as you go down. That's not easy. So I talked to a lot of people. I talked to a lot of streamers. And I looked at the DK Discord. And I talked to some brilliant minds there. And I tried to come up with what I thought was the best ordering of these covenants that I could possibly provide for you guys. And I'm pretty confident. I spent hours upon hours looking at each and every one of them for this talent calculator, which we'll go to in a second. And I think I made some really good choices here, but of course I'm going to walk you guys through it and see what you guys think. So if you have any other thoughts or comments or just interesting dynamics or situations that you thought might occur when you chose a very select path, go talk about it in the discussions below. There's just so much information here and we haven't gotten to test it yet that I would be really curious to hear what you guys think. But we got to pick one because these guys are hard to swap and they're very important. So I did everything I could to make sure I'd be giving you guys the best information I can. And I think this generally falls in line with the consensus. There might be a few places that I differ, but I have faith in this information, and I think we've got the best covenants for DK PvP right here. So I can't talk too much more in an intro because we've got so much to cover. We're going to talk Unholy, then Frost, and we're going to go through each 4 of the covenants, and I will have a timestamp for every single one of those things. So you can go back to whatever suits you or interests you the most. But let's start with Unholy in Kyrian. And spoiler alert, I think that's the best one. So we're starting off pretty strong. We're starting off pretty all in here. I think Kyrian is the best covenant. And let's talk about why. So obviously, Necrolord gets a lot of love, but take a look at these 2 things right here. So these are the most PvP friendly combination of abilities, I think, out of all of them for DK. Shackle the Unworthy is a 1-minute cooldown, which is on every single go. Think leg sweep, a 1-minute cooldown, grip, sweep, shackle. That's going to be something you're going to be hearing a lot in this first season. And it's because I think that is just so much pressure and so easy to get off, right? That's what I mean by PvP friendly, right? It doesn't require a convoluted setup. It doesn't require a few setup globals. It doesn't require a very specific situation. You press it and go. Think of Obsidian Claw from BFA, that nightmare, right? You press it and go. And when it spreads, it's going to be spreading often. And it's going to spread in that leg sweep because that's a 50% chance on those abilities. That's going to happen in the duration of a leg sweep, which means you're going to shackle a target, spread it to the other, and rot them both down. Unholy has tons of cleave damage as it is, so that is just a good look. And that is very powerful. And it's PvP friendly. It's easy to use. It's instant. It's great damage. Meanwhile, Steward is PvP friendly with its Vial for the exact same reason. Easy to use, right? Gives you a huge heal, and it removes everything on you, which is just so good in PvP because there's going to be all those things on you. Curse from Lock, Disease from DK, Poison from Rogue, Bleed from Feral, Rogue, and Warrior. And Bleed messes with DK as it is, right? We have magic damage reduction from AMS and AMZ, and we have physical damage reduction from Plate Armor. We don't have any bleed reduction because our walls are pretty low key. We don't have any big walls generally. So bleed ignores armor and ignores AMS and it just shreds you. So getting this off and getting a 20% heal on the same time, again, that's PvP friendly. It doesn't require convoluted setups. It's just a very immediately impactful tool. So Kyrian's looking pretty good, right? Both of its abilities fit right into a PvP situation. For both Frost and Unholy, again, spoilers, but especially for Unholy, just having that on-demand single target damage, that fits right into Unholy's toolkit. But more than that, all the Soulbinds are pretty good too. So let's talk about those. We look at combat meditation, and again, it just adds damage to your goes, right? You have a 1 minute go on every leg sweep, and oh, by the way, you also get 350 mastery. It's just easy. It fits right in there. And that walking through sorrowful memories thing, sure, that's not super PvP friendly, though it could happen. You could just sidestep and grab one. But again, the 350 mastery on every minute, that's just fine as it is, so you click that. We're going to take a brief moment to talk about all what I think are the best conduits. So we can get those out of the way for all of them, and we can kind of start moving through these. Because again, this is going to be a lot of information to cover. I'm going to try and make sure this video doesn't go for 2 hours. But potency conduits. Convocation is great, works well with Army of the Damned, and APOC just does good damage. So it's pretty fantastic. People were thinking that this would be good with Crypt Fever. Necromancer's Bargain, that's true. Army of the Damned, Crypt Fever, and Convocation all synergize well together. That's a thing. Eternal Hunger is just raw damage, very impactful. A Lingering Plague, I think, is very bad. I'm not super impressed by this. Embrace Death, same thing. Not that impressed by that at all. Death Coil is generally not much of our pressure. And Proliferation, though, I am impressed by, because I just talked up Shackle the Unworthy, and starts at 20%, goes to 48%, and you spread it to 2. That actually looks really good. So, Convo, Eternal Hunger, and Proliferation, all pretty impactful. For your survivability ones, only 2 are general use. That's Insatiable Appetite and Hardened Bones. And of course, Reinforced Shell is unfortunately niche, right? Because it's only good against double casters when you're going to want that zone to be your focus rather than Death Strike, which is good against everything. It's powerful, but it's not good against everything. So we would probably look at Insatiable Appetite and Hardened Bone. Insatiable Appetite is the best by far. I mean, Death Strike minimum healing increase is what they did to buff us in BFA to make us so tanky from squishy. So if we have an Endurance Conduit that does that, well, I think that's a pretty good look. And finally, you have the Finesse Conduits. All of these can be useful. It's not like the Endurance, where one of them is situationally good, but bad in some situations. Like the IBF is good always. DA movement speed is generally always good. Getting Runic Power is good, and slowing people when you grip is good. But you always kind of have a slow with Chains. Having one free global when Chains is so much better, I think, is not valuable. And a little bit of additional movement speed is not quite as impactful as the other two, so I would generally go Chilled Resistance and Spirit Drain. But Chilled Resistance is the best by far. Reducing your IBF cooldown is fantastic, especially since it's a stun break, and Rogue Mage is going to be very good. So that's what you got. Obviously, we're always going to be looking for potency conduits. They're just a pressure increaser, and that's very valuable for us. And we have some really great potency conduits. But you don't want to get sucked into a Soulbind ability that's not good. So sometimes you have to balance those. And we're going to, now that we've got all the information, right, we're going to go through these paths and balance those the best we can. Watch this, guys, right? So let's get rid of that. Let's take a look at the Soulbind abilities below. You've got defeating an enemy. Wait. If you defeat an enemy in an arena, you win the game. That's probably not very impactful. Okay, so you got defeating an enemy. Well, okay. So you don't use either of those two, right? And you go straight to the File of Patience. That's the only one that's usable, and it's actually very impactful. But all of its healing done is over 10 seconds. Drawback is not much of a drawback in PvP because sustained damage is a big thing, and burst healing is not quite as important as like getting off of a raid mechanic and you need to heal up real quick. Sustained healing is actually very valuable. That's why hot classes do so well. So this drawback is not much of a drawback. Instead, you just get a huge increase to the heal. So going with the Finesse Conduit there is not a problem. So you go down, grab the Chilled Resistance, and then you grab the File. Now you've got, of course, Insatiable Appetite. We talked about this. This row, there's one row like this for every single Soulbind where it's just goofy stuff that does not impact your gameplay at all. You guys have, if you guys have looked at a talent calculator yet, you've seen this row, right? Always, this choice is never going to matter for PvP, so we're always going to skip past it. We're going to glance past it. And the rest of these, again, no 2-hour videos today, boys. Defeating an enemy, non-file services, and cleansed cloth and enchanting materials, right? So now you know. So there's our first potency. Like I said, proliferation, convocation, eternal hunger. I am a big fan of proliferation. I think that ability is so good that I do want to buff it. So that's what I would run. And then, like I said, I think you have the option to go Hardened Bones or Spirit Drain. So you could either play Survivable or have more runic power, which is also technically survivable. Interrupting an enemy happens a lot of the time. If you get juked a lot, maybe it doesn't. Lichborn Wall, really not bad at all. I'm liking Lichborn Wall quite a bit. And that plus Shackle the Unworthy, it's just a lot of random sources of damage reduction. And you've got a big heal. You're actually starting to build yourself pretty tanky with Lichborn, Deathstrike, Deathstrike Conduit, and Shackle. And then, of course, this is a fine Soulbind ability. Just gives you verse. So again, you play tanky. So this is a very good tanky kind of constant pressure Soulbind here. And honestly, Pelagos Kyrian looking pretty good. But the other two do as well, for the most part. I think out of the three, we've got Klea, I guess is how you pronounce that. Klea? Probably the worst. So you start off with Valiant. This is guaranteed, gives you some crit. Then you look at the two below. You see well above 90%. You increase nearby party members' maximum health. Not very good in PvP. Ascendant File, much better in PvP. But unfortunately, your potency is over here. So that's where you come into your first difficult choice. You'd probably go with the potency just because of how good they are. But if you want to play more defensive, Ascendant File is insane. You know what? Honestly, that's probably worth another gander. That is just so insane, right? I went back and forth. See, now you're seeing my struggle of trying to theorycraft all this for you guys. I went back and forth on this so many times, right? Because potency, conduits are very good, but that is very good. Immune to poison and bleed means after you use your heal, not only do you effectively negate a rogue's go, you prevent him. So you can use this even low health, and it is a recovery tool. Like sometimes they might be able to finish you anyway. You get that little heal, but then they keep you that CC chain going on your healer and finish you off anyway. But if you become immune to all of their future damage, bleed and poison is what Assass is. And even Sub has a lot of bleed now and has the poisons because I added that back to Sub Rogue. Right? So effectively, you can counter a go by yourself with Vial, which is just such a great tool to have just randomly in the Soulbind ability. So that's a toss-up. And again, now you see why I had so much difficulty theory crafting this and why you guys have too. That's a toss-up. If you want to play aggressive, you go this line. If you want to play defensive, you go this line. We got the Chilled Resistance. Cleansing Rites is actually one of the only ones that, after that whole spiel, is the only one that's actually maybe impactful. You start off the game with a 10% shield. Actually really good. And the only one that's actually really good, so that could mean something. Of course, then you get the the Hardened Bones Deathstrike combo, and you need the potency, right? So I think Pointed Courage is probably a little better, but you need the potency. So you would go here, and you would grab Proliferation. Or if you would already grab Proliferation, you would grab Convocation. So, like I said, Klea or Klea, I don't know how to pronounce that, is probably the least impactful. But I guess that Cleansing Rites is the only one that's valuable in this tier out of all of the Covenants. And Ascendant File can be really good. But Pelagos seems to have a one-up on her. The argument against Pelagos is probably this Forgilite boy. Bronze Call to Action is tough to analyze, but 30 seconds of additional damage and healing is good. It's just like a companion, and those are always tend to be pretty decent in PvP. I mean, our Unholy makes its entire class design off of companions and minions, so pretty okay. You don't want to knock people away from you as DK, so you always go this way, and it's the potency conduit, so it's like a no-brainer, right? So you move down this line, you grab all of these things. We're going to start moving a lot faster as we go, because you're going to start seeing these icons and remember what they are. Like I said, this rarely, never matters. grab Insatiable. And then you probably want to go... this is really awesome, actually. You probably want to go a second Finesse Conduit, because this thing is really good. So what happens when you are reduced below 35% health as Forge-a-Light is you AoE stun people, and every 45 seconds, that's actually up a lot. You AoE stun people, and you automatically consume a charge. So let's say you're in a stun lock, you're dipping really low, right? Taking a ton of damage. Oh, you stun everybody around you, including the rogue, or maybe a double melee comp, and you immediately heal. So it's like a passive answer for Ghosts. And we have answers for those, but having another one every 45 second cooldown, wow, that's fantastic. AoE stuns are great for Unholy because we're not DRing stun that often. And again, 45 seconds is great. So you go with the double Finesse here for this. The other two I don't think you would ever want to take, right? So look at this path. You get a 1 potency, you get the double Finesse, and you get a lot of really, really cool synergistic tools where you get a lot of survivability, especially when coupled with the basic Kyrian abilities. And you get fantastic survivability once you hit 35%. Most of the time, 35% procs are unused, but this one is so impactful, right? Immediately heal up, stun everybody around you. It's like a complete reversal of fortune, right? You go from their setup to your setup, and you heal through it so you can recover easily. Wow, that's fantastic, right? I know that's good. Just a very good path here down this line. And that's Kyrian, right? We made it through one. So, what did we learn? Kyrian's base abilities are fantastic. That's why it's S tier. Kyrian's Soulbinds are very good. Both Pelagos and Forge-a-Light have enormous amount of value in those paths that I outlined there. They both have good starting Soulbind abilities as well. So Kyrian, lots of fantastic choice there. I personally, when I go Kyrian, am going to go Forge-a-Light. I really, really think that's good. And Kyrian, I believe, because of all of those things together, and these fantastic PvP-friendly abilities, is an S-tier Covenant. That was just one. It's going to be tough, guys. Going right along, boys, right? Necrolords. We've heard a lot about it. I think it's fantastic. For Unholy, I think it's A tier. Spoiler alert. For Unholy, I think it's A tier. I think Kyrian is actually better as a Covenant. Let's take a look at Necrolord. So, first, the big boy. Abomination Limb. This thing is really, really, really good. And people have been talking about it nonstop since we heard about it. It is an AoE grip. It does damage. When they try and leave, it grips them again. Right off the bat, when you press it, it grips everybody to you in a 20-yard radius. It's a perfect setup tool. It synergizes fantastically with Leg Sweep. It is great. It is great. There's no way to argue that. Of course, that's not why I think Kyrian is a little better. I think Kyrian's a little better because its Soulbinds are better. But Abomination Limb is why you choose Necrolord, right? It's this right here. It's so fun. It's so impactful. It does damage too. It's just like this 2-minute cooldown that just gives you a win condition, man. It's so burst heavy. It's incredible. So Abomination Limb is what Necrolord has going for it. Fleshcraft, on the other hand, is not nearly as good as the Elixir, the vial from before. Does a lot with corpses, which don't matter in PvP. And it's a channel that can be kicked. So Fleshcraft, giving you healing of your maximum health, 20% of it, instead of a vial that heals you immediately and gives you all of those things removed, the leads and such. Fleshcraft isn't even close. I mean, it's like 1-to-1 comparison, not even close. It's just not as good. It's better when you can consume corpses, which you're not going to do. So, Abomination Limb, greatest ability. Fleshcraft, pretty mediocre. Now we look through the conduits, and immediately, again, you're seeing the problem that does happen with Necrolord, another worthless effect in this Covenant. Using Fleshcraft with nearby corpses consumes their essence completely, granting a benefit. Well, that almost never happens in PvP either. So you're grabbing a guaranteed Soulbind ability that doesn't do anything. Out of these three,
you're looking at oozes for sure. It's a great heal, and it gives you your potency. So absolutely, you're going to run it. And again, you have the same ones, but also now you have Brutal Grasp, where Abomination Limbs does more damage. Again, Abomination Limb is a win condition for you, so you can run this. The other ones, again, Convocation and Eternal Hunger. I like buffing my win conditions, though. So then you go with Satiable. These don't matter. Then you go Convocation. And finally, you grab either your second Finesse or your second Endurance. I like the Endurance from Hardened Bones, and you get Ultimate Form. Ultimate Form is a really sick skill shot. That is probably the reason you would choose Plague Deviser, besides the fact that you get 2 potency, which is very good. Fantastic skill shot. It says, while channeling Fleshcraft, you are immune to crowd control, which means you can target and remove any crowd, or immune any crowd control incoming on you at any time. You can pre-do this for Kidneys if you predict it. That's a skill shot. You can do it on a Poly coming in. You can do it on a Fear coming in. You can do it on a Grip AoE stun if you're being gripped, which doesn't happen a lot, but you can immediately start channeling Fleshcraft and no immune the sweep. Or if you see your healer getting gripped, then you can precast Fleshcraft and you're going to immune the sweep that is going to try and put on your healer. As soon as your healer is flying in from the grip, right, you channel Fleshcraft. There's a million different skill shot situations you can put yourself in with Ultimate Form. But that doesn't even cover the fact that sometimes you can get it off. Sure, it's kickable, but let's say you're playing against God Comp, Mage Shadow Priest, and they have one kick and they use it on the healer. Channel this, get a full heal, be immune to CC the entire time, and then get 4 seconds of crowd control immunity after. It's a skill shot with a lot of different modes, so to speak, and it's just very, very good. The skill shot itself, I mean, the amount of things you could do with it. Pre-ultimate form of Kidney, pre-ultimate form of Poly, pre-ultimate form of Grip Stun. Just fantastic. It really stops goes. And on a 2-minute cooldown, again, that's not terrible for something that can swing a game. So, Plague Deviser looking good. I'm going to look at the other 2 real quick. I think they're bad. I don't think they're good. So I think we might be able to move along through Necrolord. And I'm going to tell you why. I'm not going to go through these paths. Emily just got nerfed on Lead by Example, which was the one thing it had going for it. Everything else is pretty unimpactful. Channeling Fleshcraft while moving is so much worse than Ultimate Form. I think everybody knows why. Skill shot CC immunity versus channeling a small heal while moving? No thank you, dude. No thank you. And of course, 5% health for 30 seconds. Very unimpactful for Fleshcraft. That's not that important as it is. And then you have these guys. If you guys have looked at any of these bottom tier Soulbind abilities, the ones at the bottom here, you got 9% movement speed in 3s if they're all stacked on top of you, so generally 3 or 6%. Not very impactful. Gain 3% haste after defeating an enemy. Please don't make me tell you why that's bad. And there's a good fear that I think is dispellable. This is nothing compared to that 35% AoE stun. It's at 20% health at that point. If you're fearing nearby enemies, 1, it could be casters. That's bad. 2, it could be an enormous amount of dots on you, which is very bad. Or it could just be dispelled or Zerker Raged by a warrior. The amount of outs for Sulfuric Emission at a 20% health once every minute, which is actually worse than the other one. This is nothing like that other one we talked about with the 35% AoE stun where it also pairs with a heal. This thing's trash. I talked about this way too much. I really think Emini or whatever is just bad. But Bonesmith is worse. Forgeborn is, again, dead, just like Plaguebringers was. But it's dead and it has nothing else going for it, right? Forgeborn has you die and then fight for 10 seconds and do 50% less damage. Yeah, if anybody dies to this in Arena, put that on an MLG compilation video, dude, right? Put that on the highlight reel. Nobody should die to Forgeborn Reveries. This thing is terrible. This entire row, defeating an enemy, we know why that's bad. Serrated Spalders is only hit at melee range, so very niche use, doesn't do that much even when it goes off. Defeating an enemy is bad. Landing 10 critical strikes for increased critical strike chance is fine, but it makes you take another endurance conduit. And damaging or healing a target below 35% is not very impactful in PvP because you're trying to get them low, not trying to keep them low once they're there. Plenty of executes in the game for that, or CC chains. You really need to get them to that point. This is not very impactful in PvP. Oh, and by the way, it only gives you a sprint. So, Necrolord, Plaguebringer, good. The other ones, bad. But even Plaguebringer has its weaknesses in that it has a totally worthless Soulbind ability to start, and Necrolord as a whole has Fleshcraft, which is just effectively worse in every way than the Elixir. Sure, it has like a 2-minute cooldown, but the channel, and the fact that you can get kicked during it, and the fact that it doesn't do all those awesome extra things, that's pretty rough. Now, I put this thing in A tier, remember. That's what I want with this. Necrolord is A tier. So I'm not sitting here bashing all over your favorite Soulbind. All of that said, right, it has tough Soulbinds, right? It has tough Soulbind abilities, and it has very, very bad boys over here, right? It's still A tier because of how good Abomination's Limb is. This thing is unbelievable. I want to play with this so bad, right? It is so impactful. It is a win condition. It is a totally new way to play the game. It is crazy. It is fun. It is exciting. It does damage. It's great. So literally, off of Abomination Limb and maybe Ultimate form, but mostly just Abomination's Limb, by itself, Necrolord is A tier. That's how good this thing is. So don't worry, I'm not bashing your favorite thing. That's my favorite thing too. But come on. The conduits are, for all in all, so much worse than Kyrian. Of course, I would still give the nod to Kyrian. This is going to be a 2-hour video. Alright, so finally, not finally, but next, we have Night Fae. And for Unholy, I'm not feeling it. The Soulbinds are actually really good, and the paths are good, but I don't think the abilities do much of anything at all for Unholy, right? I mean, I could be dropping it to D tier, but watch how good the Soulbinds can be before I do that, right? But Death's Due for Unholy is so bad. For Frost, spoiler again, you know it increases your Obliterate to have another target, and that's crazy, because original D&D doesn't do that. But D&D does already make your Scourge Strike AoE, so this thing is almost unimpactful. You're just getting the Death's Due reduces damage enemies deal to you, and transfer strength during a short window on a weird setup. That's not that good, especially when you compare it to frickin' Mr. AoE Gorfiend's Grasp multi-abomination limb. It's just not good. And Soul Shape is good mobility, but DK has a toolkit that works with the fact that it doesn't have that much mobility. And this isn't that much of a game changer when you consider how the main ability for Unholy, Death's Due, is almost a complete non-factor. It is almost a complete non-factor. I know I'm starting to make it sound more and more like D tier when you have an ability that's completely worthless, pretty much. Okay, I should not say that. When you compare it to the other abilities that we just gushed about and how good they were, Death's Due is not nearly as good. Obviously, every Covenant does something, but Death's Due does not do much compared to those. And Soul Shape cannot make up for it when it gives us something that we lack, but something that our toolkit really doesn't demand. Wouldn't you rather AoE grip everybody to you and your partner and both of you destroy them rather than getting some Blinky-esque movement speed sprint for DK that doesn't traditionally need it? Yeah. So these are bad for Unholy. They're not good. But the Soulbinds are. Now let's take a look at them real quick, all right? So, let's go through Grove Invigoration, Mastery, increase maximum health. It's fine. And your Night Fae class ability gets much better, which is nice. The Redirected Anima starts originally, or right off the bat, so you get that damage increase. You reduce their damage, even though you're probably going to do it in sweeps, which is another reason why it's so bad. We know all this by now. You would just go these bad boys. You can get a big heal, or you can get a cooldown reduction, which has a defeat component, so we would get the heal. You just go down the line, and you can either grab a movement slow that does some damage, or a really good amount of damage on kick. And I think it's actually certainly the damage on kick. So you get another potency conduit, and you get the damage on kick. So you get the double potency, you get a decent heal, you get a decent effect to your Death's Due, and you get some damage on kick. Naya is fine. Pretty decent. But I think the real exciting stuff comes in Dreamweaver for Frost, spoiler alert again, but Korane for both. Korane is very interesting. I want to go through that, but I'll just sneak through Dreamweaver since I promised I would go through every single one of these and kind of explain them. I have to go fast though. I know I'm moving quick. Bring up the Soulbind calculator while you watch this video and go back to some of the timestamps so you can kind of hover over and see why I'm skipping through them. Certain unimpactful things, especially in a C tier covenant, would be a waste of your guys' time right now when we have 2 entire specs to go through. So go through it and check it out with me. Pod Tender is very bad. Should I even go through this? Pod Tender is so bad. It regenerates your health, but if your Wild Seed dies, then you die, and people can just kill it and kill you. So maybe it would sometimes work. I don't think so. Generally looking to get Insatiable here, and then of course Convocation, and then you have Soothing Voice. I think is actually really strong, and it gives you that potency, right? So you have a shield from overhealing. That's fine. You have versatility gain when they're within 8 yards of you, your allies, but you shouldn't be stacking on your healer all game, so that's not that great. Fine in double melee, I guess. And then you have a 90% slow every time one of these effects are removed. That's Pet Root, Pet Stun, and Asphyxiate. Pet Stun is extremely good with Soothing Voice. It's like a showstopper for a second. If you Pet Stun them, then you're essentially going to get to them because when you Pet Stun them, they're sitting there for like 1.5 seconds and then they got a 90% slow on them. That's actually really impactful and interesting. And even better with Frost. That gets an AoE route if you choose to go in that direction. So a really cool way of getting a 90% slow, like Turbo Fist in the game. You get your potency, and then you get your next endurance. And then you get the utility one that doesn't matter. And then you get Field of Blossoms. So we went through this line pretty much just so I could show you how it's going to be good for Frost. This gives you haste while you put down Death's Due. Like I said, spoiler alert, I don't think this is going to be, the Night Fae is going to be as bad for Frost as it is for Unholy. And that haste is active while you're doing your burst window with Death's Due. So we're going to put that on hold, but Dreamweaver is bad for Unholy. But Korane isn't, okay? So let's take a look at this. Wild Hunt Tactics. Your damage to targets above 75% health and healing to targets below 35% health has increased by 10%. So that's a pretty decent damage increase for getting people low when they're topped. You top, and then you get a damage buff, you get them back low, then they top themselves, they get back low, right? But when you increase that, your abilities in that way, right, you get 15% increased movement speed. Now guess what? In threes, there's always going to be somebody above 75% health. If you put a dot on the healer, you're getting this effect. So Wild Hunt Tactics is 15% movement speed. That's just what that means. You got 15% movement speed. You're going to be able to get that. So that's kind of like the old Unholy Presence. That's like good. Obviously, Unholy Presence reduce your GCD as well, but having that movement speed, now that's a mobility I can get along with. And when you couple that with Soul Shape, now you actually start to have that unpeel ability that makes it less of a bizarre addition to your toolkit. And actually, like, wait, why I can't peel a DK? Like, what's going on here? Especially when you couple that with Death's Advance. So you could make a mobile DK build with Korane, and you can start looking right at these other ones. You get the Potency Conduit, which is great. Then you get Soul Shape, increasing movement speed of allies, which is more mobility, 10%. Then you get the utility one, which doesn't matter. And then you can also get your second potency. So you actually get your double potency that you want. And it's not even horrible. Face your foes, your spells and abilities decrease the damage they inflict on you. Well, you're going to be in front of your target a lot. That's how PvP works, right? You're not a rogue. You're not kidding people in the back and shadow stepping behind them, right? So, honestly, every time you do any spell, you're reducing the damage they inflict on you. So you can crush warlocks and stationary targets by having high uptime on them, just making them do 9% damage less to you all the time. So Kyrian becomes this interesting constant passive movement speed increase while you have soul shape, while you have some decent defensive options and team mobility, and you actually have a good Soulbind. The problem is Death's Due is so trash. So we'll pay more attention to that in Frost. That's why Night Fae, rather, is still C tier, right? Because there's some really interesting options here. You get movement speed, you get permanent movement speed and decent damage increase. You get a really nice damage reduction that destroys immobile casters, right? That's 9% perma. 9% perma wall is half a D-stance with no drawback on a 1 Soulbind ability. Yeah, that's good. Yeah, it's absolutely good. So, thank you for following me during my YouTube recording. Let's give a shout out to that guy. That's going to be awesome for the video. So that's Night Fae, right? Kyrian has a ton of potential. The other two are not good for Unholy at all. But the abilities are so bad that it's still bad. And we had that exact opposite thing with Necrolord. And finally, we got Venthyr. I'm going to stick that right up on B tier. So Venthyr is interesting. The Soulbinds are just weird and PvE-centric generally. And the Door of Shadows is so bad because it's a 1.5 second cast mobility. We talk about not needed mobility. I mean, a targeted 1 minute cooldown port with a 1.5 second cast time. What if they just move while you're casting it? I mean, it's just generally not applicable to any situation. But once again, saving grace, Swarming Mist. The main ability here for DK, very good. It does a ton of damage. It does shadow damage, which for some reason now scales with your mastery, so Unholy can get a ton of benefit out of this. Frost, not so much. And it gives you a ton of runic power in every AoE setup that you're doing, right? So it constantly takes damage, and every time it takes damage to everybody around you in those AoE setups, it generates runic power. That ends up being a ton, which means you can just spam spenders during that time. It can be used defensively because spenders can heal you. It can be used offensively because spenders do damage. It even gives you dodge for some reason. I mean, you wouldn't say no. And it does a lot of damage that scales with your mastery, scales with your Necrotic Aura. It's on a 1 minute cooldown. That's a good AoE setup. 1 minute cooldowns that are easy to use in PvP. Literally, you just press them and they go. You don't need that much. Obviously, doing damage to everything around you is not hard. You want to be on your targets anyway. You're not really playing at a range. Swarming Mist is great. Door of Shadows is bad. If Swarming Mist was coupled with something very good here, maybe it's A tier. But, man, that's bad. And also, the Soulbinds are bad. And I think that's the real problem. A lot of them, and you'll notice this, are very PvE-centric. So, like, benefits of well-fed flask and weapon enchant effects. The first enemy you damage in combat is marked as your adversary. That's fine. Familiar Predicaments is absolutely fantastic for healers. Duration of your incoming interrupt, snare, and root effects. Man, that's going to be great for healers. They'll be able to get away easier. And of course, having interrupt reduction, well, that's just a no-brainer. Obviously, you want that as a healer. But some of these things, they're just not good. A 6-second disorient feels amazing until you realize that it's a 1.5 second cast, and you're just showcasing where you're going to be, and if people just kind of move, you can do it as a setup, like you can stun them, like off asphyxiate them, and then cast Door of Shadows. But again, that 1.5 second cast might screw you. I mean, you could just get stopped during that period, and that's very bad. This is a high reward tool, though. If you can get an asphyxiate into a 6-second disorient, that's 10 seconds of CC. That's incredible. But it's not likely. That's the one you would go, though. Because I don't think a movement speed increase on this bad mobility cooldown is nearly as good as the potential situation that can come from this, right? So you would just go down this line and you'd see a lot of bad stuff. But you would probably do... I hate this line, right? You have Dauntless Duelist, which is just a 3% passive damage buff to one dude. Or you have this, and you can never get interrupted, so that doesn't matter. But the snare and root effects are probably really good. Root effects specifically are very good. Snares are not that important because you have Death's Advance, but if you can't get dispelled on a root, then that's nice. So you would grab the Potency Conduit because Potency Conduits are so good. And you would probably run Gloom, because again, when you have a good ability from your Covenant, you want to buff it. And this is definitely a good ability. So that's the path you would run here. The other ones just get worse, man. You got Combat Potions. You got... there's another really sloppy one in here. You get Dodge Chance Increase. Oh, no, hold on. It was... no, it was even worse. That was the Conduit. That one's actually really good, obviously. It's this one, right? Leisurely Gate. Door of Shadows has 2 charges, but its cooldown is increased by 30 seconds. Getting these things back to back doesn't matter, and increasing its cooldown is probably a much better detriment than having 2 charges as a positive, especially when it has the cast time. If this bad boy was an instant, we would be talking about how, what, DK has mobility? Oh my god. But 1.5 second cast on 2 charges, that is a lot of time you're spending not doing anything. And it actually has a drawback, right? That's the one I was looking for. That thing is terrible. And by the way, standing in the shaded area, yeah, you don't want to do that very often for not that impactful a change. That is something that requires you to stand in a positional requirement. So again, these things are so obviously good for Mythic Plus, where this Venthyr excels, but so obviously bad for PvP, where you can't use its effects. So honestly, I'm not even going to talk about Theotar, because he's clearly PvE. You don't want to stand in shaded area. You don't want any of these tools. You don't want to free yourself from roots and snares if it requires a 1.5 second cast to do so. Like, if this was Gnome Racial, man, it would be sick. But it's just, these things don't synergize because of how bad Door of Shadows is. I'm pretty certain about that. I don't think Venthyr was on too many people's radar. I think it was just too clunky. But it can be really good because of the AoE damage. But I am not having confidence with Door of Shadows, man, or any of the synergies that it provides. I'm not talking about Theotar, and I can't talk about this general guy either, because either he has like the worst Soulbind abilities ever, or like they're really good for a different situation, right? So you have a decent damage reduction below 40% health. That is fine. But for the main Soulbind ability, it's bad because you also have this Upon Death thing, which is a total gimmick. So you have the Stone Husk that shatters after 3 seconds. Generally, after you die, you lose an arena, so I don't think I have to talk too much about that. It's a gimmick. Like, Res Totem wasn't good, dude, so neither is that. When a nearby ally gains temporary increased movement speed, you also gain a benefit up to 30%. That's fine when playing with a partner that'll do that a lot. More Door of Shadows synergies that gives you a small heal. It's so unimpactful. And when you get down to the bottom again, standing still grants you health. Don't really want to stand still in PvP. Interrupting gives you gives an ally critical strike chance. Okay. That's fine, I guess. And then you just got a stacking primary stat. Really uninspired bottom line here, and nothing was that great up here, and we've already talked more than enough about the conduits. It's just, Venthyr's Soulbinds aren't that great. They're very PvE-centric. The only one I kind of like is Nagia. Everybody's name is hard to pronounce. It is all because I think Door of Shadows is just not a play. I think it's just not a play in PvP. I think it is clunky and difficult to use, so all synergies become clunky and difficult to use. If Door of Shadows was instant, and then you could use all these synergies while setting them up with Swarming Mist, we'd be talking a totally different story. Maybe we'd be bumping this bad boy up to S tier, okay? Like, I'm not sitting here just trying to bash. Maybe if Venthyr was your favorite, I'm not trying to sit here just crap all over it. Like, clearly, if that was an instant, it would be amazing, right? But it's not. It is not that. And thus, it's not that great. So I'm going to keep that at B tier. And that is Unholy. Holy cow. That was tough. I'm going to timestamp those so you guys can go back and try and get a feel for it. I went fast, but I swear, if I went slow and like talked about every single Soulbind ability and very extensive detail, this video would be unwatchable. I don't even know if we're doing good on time now. I don't think I want to look, but that would be like a 3-hour video. But the takeaways, right? Look at the tier list, okay? What can you tell about the tier list? You have Kyrian with 2 fantastic Covenant abilities and some great Soulbinds that don't just play into a PvE environment, that play into a PvP and utility environment very well. You have Necrolord, which has the core best ability from any Covenant abilities in the game, and some decent ultimate form, that flesh heal sort of deal that can be very synergistic with the Soulbinds, despite them not being as good as Kyrian. So why? It moves down it goes from S to A. Then you have Venthyr, which we just talked about a ton. One great AoE ability that can be a lot of pressure, terrible Soulbinds, and a bad mobility tool. And the Night Fae with awful abilities, but decent Soulbinds, right? So you can just kind of see how we move down the list, right? And it really highlights just how good Kyrian was. PvP centric, PvP friendly, easy to use, no convoluted setups required, very utility heavy, fantastic output. Kyrian. Necrolord is very similar. Very close, right? That's Unholy. That's Unholy, boys. So let's reset this, alright? And let's talk Frost. Now this will go quicker across the board because we just talked about every single ability and what it does. So now we just have to decide how that changes things for Frost. And I'm going to start with Necrolord because I believe that it is the S tier Covenant for Frost. And like I said, I'm not going to go through all the paths again. I'm just going to tell you why I believe those things change. And it's because Abomination's Limb is so important with Frost. We already talked about how good it is. But what we didn't mention is how good Frost Cleave already is. Remorseless Winter, Frostworm's Fury, Chill Streak. AoE Cleave is the name of the game. Howling Blast, Rhyme Procs. AoE Cleave is the name of the game for Frost. So Abomination's Limb becomes that much better when it's an enabler of your win condition that already is like, oh, we win. Grip, Blind, Sweep, Chill Streak. Then 45 seconds later, Abomination's Limb, Chill Streak. What is their answer to goes like that? They're constantly... So once the Chill Streak goes down and they somehow live it, they're still getting pulled by Abomination's Limb. So you're still hitting them with all your Remorseless, Howling Blast, and whatever your partner's Cleave is. Abomination Limb has direct synergy with Frost. It's just absolutely fantastic. And just a clear pick. So while we're here then, let's talk about the conduits that are so good with Frost. I think the Frost conduits are a little more impactful for damage than Unholy, though I still think Brutal Grasp is very, very good. But I think Accelerated Cold and Remorseless are very, 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 very good. Remorseless Winter, Everfrost here, that again, AoE damage, very, very impactful when you're building your stuff, your conduit, your covenants, around setting up those AoE goes. So Accelerated Cold, fantastic. Everfrost, fantastic. Accelerated Cold is also good because Rune Generation is not as important to sync up with all your cooldowns as it is in PvE. Just having resources is very good for survivability, and having haste is great for getting your globals off, which is important in PvP, because sometimes a Death Strike is needed, and you need that global cooldown to be faster so you can get a couple off and live. So haste and resources are always just better, even if they're desynced. In PvE, desync is an absolute no. People despise that. In PvP, it doesn't matter quite as much. So you would go down the same line, and the endurance and finesse conduit are the same for Frost and Unholy. So Necrolord, very, very good. For all the same reasons it's very good for Unholy, but slightly better because Frost DK is more based around cleave setups. Chill Streak. Chill Streak. Chill Streak. Chill Streak. I mean, that's just a go-to. This one, my boy Kyrian, was so hard. I was originally going to put it at A, but I think we just have 2 S tier covenants for Frost, dude. Kyrian is good for all the same reasons it's good for Unholy. And this is insane. Shackle is insane for Frost. I mean, unbelievably good. When you have a chill streak go, and you grip sweep them in, and you put Shackle on one and it spreads to the other, that means you have chill streak bouncing between them, and you have Shackle on both of them, and you have Remorseless Winter, Howling Blast, and all your and Frost Fever takes and all your partner's damage. So you've got all that cleave, but then you have 2 direct 2-target abilities. Shackle, spread to another target, and Chill Streak, bouncing between 2 targets. How do you handle that? How do you handle that situation? What do you do about Shackle on 2 targets and Chill Streak bouncing between 2 targets? I have no idea. I don't even know, dude. How can this not be S tier? And we already know the Soulbinds are good, and they're good for all the same reasons. All this stuff is still good. Getting versatility is great. Having mastery on demand during a chill streak go is still great. I'm talking myself into it, dude. I think this is double S tier. Kyrian is like triple S tier, man. Okay. Grip, blind, sweep, chill streak, shackle. Shackle spreads with combat meditation. You get mastery, which increases your chill streak while your shackle spreads, and you burst them both down. It's insane. And it's instant. It's not even hard. It's not even this convoluted setup that would never happen except for in your wildest dreams. It's instant. It's easy. Press Chill Streak, then press Shackle. I think we're all capable of doing that, right? That is a powerful setup. Forge Light is good for all the same reasons. And that AoE stun, when you hit 35% health, you can use that to immediately swap pressure. If you Chill Streak in that proc AoE stun, since it can happen every 45 seconds, they could line up occasionally. That's just like an immediate swap of pressure. Kyrian Soulbinds are the best. And Kyrian's Shackle is like the best. So Kyrian is the best. And we're going to get to the conclusion of this video, but you guys already see it. My suggestion is going to be Kyrian for both specs. And Frost... With that spread pressure and those great Soulbinds that we already talked about, that is fantastic. I guess technically you'll have to watch the whole video. You can't just skip to whatever section because the Unholy one comes first, and I already talked about everything. I'm not going to bore everybody by talking about them all again, but at least once you've seen the whole video and seen all the rationale, you'll be able to skip to the Frost part just for refresher's sake. But you'll have to watch the Unholy part if you came here directly from a timestamp. Because 3-hour video, man. I can't do it. Night Fae for Frost, much better. I was frustrated by this in my original theory crafting too, and I never came to a solution. I was hoping I would just all in and pick something. I would just stick to my guns. It's better for Frost. Those two are so good. I don't even think it can be in the same stratosphere as them. I was originally going to call this A. I think I might still do it. The reason why is because Cleave Obliterates I don't think are that much of a pipe dream. I know there has been a consensus that this is very hard to get off because of slow globals, but hear me out. If you guys don't know, Death's Due makes your obliterate cleave to an additional target. Again, very synergistic with a bouncing chill streak and very synergistic with a grip line sweep go. But how would you get that off, right? If you're struggling with globals, drop it, Chains of Ice your target, drop it down right on top of them. Next global is grip. So Death's Due is down. Now you're gripping them into the Death's Due. The healer into the Death's Due. Then you blind, just like you generally would. Chill Streak and AoE sweep, right? And the Death's Due has been down that entire time. So that opening global really didn't harm you in any way, right? So Death's Due down. Grip into it. Blind. Chill Streak, leg sweep. And now you've got a bouncing Chill Streak with leg sweep while doing obliteration, AoE obliterates. It's gotta be good, man. That's gotta be good. I don't think it's as good as Necrolord. I don't think it's as good as Kyrian. But if you just do the Death's Due and then do the same go we've been doing for 3 years, then you get to AoE obliterate people in a leg sweep. And obliterate hits hard now. So it's like Chill Streak is bouncing and obliterates are cleaving. And you're going to be crushing people on that go. Kyrian is easier to set up. Death's Due is more value for sure if it works. So I gotta give Night Fae the nod for being one of the most powerful setups of all time. Alright, that is just insane. Chill Streak is bouncing and you're AoEing people with your strongest ability. It's insane. Kyrian, we already talked about how good that was. It's still that good for Frost. But you add in Dreamweaver, and this is why. Remember? Activating your Night Fae class ability puts flowers at your feet for 15 seconds. Pretty memey, but you get 12% haste. So what you do is you drop that Death's Due, and you get the 12% haste for every additional setup global. So Death's Due, 12% haste makes your grip, blind, leg sweep, chill streak, spam obliterate faster. And once they get out of the sweep, they're still 70% slowed from chill streaks, so you're still AoE cleaving for a few more swings to get that pressure off. So Dreamweaver becomes a lot better with Field of Blossoms, and Kyrian is still good because of all the weird, like again, you can always proc this 15% increased movement speed by having Frost Fever on the healer that's not low health, right? Always can proc that. So it's just good for whatever reason. I have to give a nod to Night Fae. I pushed it down. I originally was going to go all in and be like, this crazy setup with Ferret Pheromones. Remember the legendary that gives you 15% haste? That's 12% from the flowers, 15% from pheromones. AoE obliterates, chunking everybody with 27% increased haste and a chill streak bouncing in a leg sweep. That sounds pretty good. But it is a very in-depth setup that requires that setup to go off without a hitch, unlike these other two that kind of just are PvP friendly. So I'll pull it down from S. I know some people have it at B. I pray nobody has it at like the worst one ever. I think if the setup is reliable enough with pheromones and the flowers seem to be insane, I think it'll be A. If the setup is completely unreliable, I guess it could be C. So maybe somewhere around here. It's a hard one to land. It's hard. We need experimentation in real competitive games. Anyway, Venthyr's bad. For Frost, it's bad. It's bad. It's all the same problems with Door of Shadows for Unholy. Additionally, you always want to do setups by pulling them to you because your chill streak setups are so important. Mobility becomes even less important. And this thing don't even scale with your mastery. It does shadow damage. And for some reason, they made that scale with mastery. But war mastery does frost damage. So Swarming Mist is just objectively worse. Ouch. So Venthyr, all the same synergistic problems between Door of Shadows and all the conduits. But also, Swarming Mist is worse just by default because it doesn't scale with your mastery. So I just dropped it down a tier, right? I moved it from B to C. It's just effectively worse in every way for Frost. I don't think that's arguable. It's just mathematically worse. And there you have it. That was the hardest video I've ever made. I'm generally much more strict and set in stone. And I do the best that I can to make sure everybody's like, yeah, this is what I'm going to run. Oh, I can see why this is what it is. That's not easy with Covenants, man. There's a lot going on, and we haven't tested a dang thing in Shadowlands yet. But here's the great part about it. I'm very confident with my final synopsis. Because while these things down here are a little convoluted, one thing's for sure. Kyrian's amazing. And Necrolord is amazing and really, really fun. So you just pick Kyrian or Necrolord, it seems like, right? Even though Night Fae, it was hard to place where this thing would be, who cares? Look at these. They're BIS for both Unholy and Frost. And that's what everybody's been asking me, guys. The final conclusion of this video is a positive one. It's like the fanfare sounds and everybody's ecstatic. They're BIS for both specs. So if you want to play Frost and Unholy and you want to mess around with both and you want to try them both as the expansion progresses, you can. Because if you love Abomination's Limb too much to give it up, I believe it's S tier for Frost and A tier for Unholy. And if you're like, no, dude, I want to go with what it seems to be the overall best general use Covenant in the game, you can go with Kyrian, and it's BIS for both. You have, right here at the top, we can ignore these bad boys for a second, right? Just throw them down. Well, I really shouldn't do that because people are going to think that that's what that actually is, right? But seriously, forget about them for a second. Hold your hand in front of the screen and get rid of these for a second. These are the two Covenants that really matter right now for Death Knight. And that's a good feeling. Because that gives you some certainty. That gives you some clarity. You came to this video for clarity, and it looked like you weren't going to get it in the beginning. It was like, oh my god, he's dancing around. It's like, this is kind of good, this is kind of good, and what do I do with this information? But when you take a look at it, you've got two definitive good Covenants for both specs. And remember, for both of them, you had some pretty definitive Soulbinds as well. Kyrian, Pelagos, and Forgelite. Necrolord, Plague Divisor. So after all of this talk and all of this information coming at you, and I'm going to put a timestamp for this called the definitive answer, you can run Kyrian with Pelagos or Forgelite, or Necrolord with Plague Divisor. That took the 24 options between 12 for Frost and 12 for Unholy, and combined the best ones for both into three options. Plague Divisor Necrolord, Pelagos Kyrian, and Forgelite Kyrian. Hardest video I've ever made, boys. I tried. That's not an easy one, but I hope that helps. I know those final thoughts should be pretty accurate. I think that's the general consensus of most players now too. So you can pick those and feel really good about it. And I will be doing that as well. If you want to know, I'm going to go Kyrian. I think Necrolord and the AoE grip is the most incredible ability I've ever seen in this game. But Kyrian, that is so PvP friendly, and the conduits, Soulbinds look fantastic. So I'm going to go Kyrian personally, but both fantastic options. And that's my video, but I don't even want to look at how long it was. I'm going to just say peace, and oh boy. All right, 1 hour ain't bad. Thank you guys for watching. I hope that helped. Again, there will be timestamps all over the place to try and get a feel for it. But hopefully the definitive final answer gives you guys what you need. And I will see you soon in the Shadowlands. Peace!